Yippee-ki-yay, melon farmer. Same name, different game. Die Hard Arcade.
Ha, 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 ha. I want the freshest cat possible.
Hello and happy holidays. Welcome to 2016's 12th and final episode of Same Name, Different Game. To celebrate the season, we are looking at a game sort of based on the gold standard of action cinema and a personal Christmas favorite, Die Hard. So let's get started, as always, with a little history. If you want to know more about the film, I suggest taking a look at last year's Christmas episode on Die Hard for the PC Engine and NES. As for this game, it was released in Japan as Dynamite Deka by SEGA themselves, and in the US by SEGA and Fox Interactive as Die Hard Arcade in the arcade in 1996. There are rumors that the game was meant to be a Die Hard game from the get-go, but SEGA of Japan couldn't reach an agreement with Fox in time to release it over there. I was unable to substantiate that, but according to an interview with Sega Technical Institute's Stig Hedlund conducted in 2006 by Sega16.com, the game was in fact developed in the US at the Sega Technical Institute as a co-production with Sega's AM1 arcade division. They sent people over to STI in California to work on this game as a collaboration, so I guess it's not that far-fetched? Honestly, another thing that would lend credence to this rumor is the Japanese art for the game. The Player 1 character known as Bruno Dellinger in that version and John McClane in the US version looks even more like Bruce Willis in these illustrations than he does on the cover of the US Saturn port. And that's where we're going to start, with the US Saturn port. Now you might be asking yourself, why not start with the arcade version? And the answer is because there is effectively no difference between the arcade version and the Saturn version. The only thing that you can really say is that there are more options with the dip switches of the arcade cabinet. The Saturn port is strangely light on options, allowing you basically to turn off friendly fire between the Player 1 and Player 2 characters and turn on violence, which is basically just small spurts of blood from the enemies. And so here we are, released in 1997 in Japan, Europe, and the US, it's Die Hard Arcade for the Saturn. The game is a beat-em-up, among the first 3D beat-em-ups, if not the very first 3D beat-em-up. And some of those don't really work, but this one does, in large part because it still plays like a 2D brawler. Both the player and the enemies can only face left or right, which is a good thing. Doing a 3D belt scroller where the player can face any direction is largely the reason why, just as a random for example, Turtles in Time Re-Shelled sucked out loud. You make your way through the Nakatomi building on a quest to save the president of the Nakatomi Company's daughter from criminal mastermind Wolf Hongo, who, let's be honest, he's no Hans Gruber, but he's amusing in his own way. The cutscenes tell the story of the little girl having given her captors the slip, and she is literally hiding mere feet away from Hongo himself, who is apparently just too dumb to look in the desk and find her. The game gives you a wide variety of offense to use, and plays like a simplified Virtua Fighter. You have punch, kick, and jump buttons, and you can use them all together to form combos, do throws, drop elbows, and more. There are also a ton of weapons, from the mundane to the wacky, from pistols that you can use to arrest foes, taking them out of the game pretty much immediately, to hatchets, brooms, rocket launchers, anti-tank guns, and ho ho ho, now I've got a machine gun, among many other tools. It's not the most robust brawler of all time, but it definitely gives you plenty of ways to take down these terrorists. It also includes some cool set pieces, like climbing these dual ladders towards the end, and some fun proto-QuickTime events. Sometimes when you're moving from area to area, you'll see a prompt to punch, kick, jump, or hit a direction on the D-pad. Hitting the correct button usually takes out an enemy, though sometimes it dodges a hazard instead. If you miss the enemy, you'll have to fight them, but if you hit them, it's incredibly satisfying and you get a cool slow-motion cinema of your character taking them out. As for the hazards, if you don't avoid those, you lose a chunk of health. The game is really enjoyable, but despite how much fun it is, there is one major problem. It's short. I mean, really short. Like 20 minutes short. And that's not because I'm some super high-level player. I mean, I would be surprised if it took anyone more than 30 minutes to beat this game, even on your first playthrough. But that does go to show how far gaming has come in the last 20 years. I mean, can you imagine someone putting out a full-priced retail release these days that clocked in at 20 minutes? People would absolutely riot, and they would probably be right to do so, but in 1997, man, that arcade perfect action was worth it. And I should mention there's a tiny bit more to this home port, in all fairness. They included a random SEGA arcade game from the late 70s, Deep Scan. You play as a battleship attacking submarines with depth charges, and at first blush this seems totally bizarre and extraneous, until you realize that the main game only gives you 4 credits at 1 life a pop to beat the game. Playing Deep Scan is how you get more credits. So let me help you out here. Hans, Booby, I'm your white knight. Play Deep Scan for a bit before you start a game of Die Hard Arcade. I would also be remiss if I didn't bring up a couple of odd quirks that aren't terrible, but things you should just be aware of. First, when you defeat the last enemy in a section, you drop any weapon that isn't a pistol, and you're frozen as soon as that enemy disappears. So if there are any health recovery items or ammo you want to grab, make sure you do it before that final enemy is dispatched. Also, the cutscenes all load in segments, leading to a really choppy, disjointed feel. Here, just take a look, and know that I did not edit this footage in any way.
It's taking you so long to get rid of those SWAT guys! It's open! It's open! Yes!
So that's all well and good. But if I'm not talking about the arcade version because it's effectively the same as the Saturn version, then what else am I talking about? Well, SEGA re-released Dynamite Deka in Japan only on the PlayStation 2 in 2006 as part of the SEGA Ages 2500 line of reissues. That version was later put on the Japanese PlayStation Network store as a downloadable title for the PlayStation 3, which is how I played it. Ported by an internal team at SEGA of China, the PS2 version of Dynamite Deka is the template for how a remake should be done. For starters, you can play the game with the original arcade graphics in Saturn mode if you want to, but you can also play in Dynamite Deka mode with completely redone graphics, and this game looks good. I mean, not Metal Gear Solid 3 or Shadow of the Colossus good, but considerably better than the original. and they did a great job of updating a lot of these models. I mean, look at the Stage 3 boss, for example. He goes from like a random football player to Incredible Hulk Rey Mysterio, apparently? I'm serious, look at that mask. That is Rey Mysterio's mask. As for gameplay, the game plays just like the original, to the point that I can't really think of any differences I noticed at all in the actual gameplay. The music and even the original voice tracks also seem to come straight from the original version.
It's open! It's open! Yes!
This seems like an appropriate time to point out the regional differences, since this is a Japanese-only version of the game. It's lacking the Die Hard license, so the building itself is no longer the Nakatomi building. It looks completely different. And all the logos for the Nakatomi Corporation are removed from the interior environments as well. But strangely, this version is more Christmassy, including snow when you're outside and a Christmas tree in the lobby in Stage 3. Oh, and while we're talking about the lobby in Stage 3, for some reason the PS2 version has some absolutely brutal slowdown during this fight here in the fountain. The Saturn version doesn't, and there's no slowdown that I noticed in the rest of the PS2 version, but this one fight, I don't know, it's a problem. So let's move on from the core game. Like I said, this is how remakes should be done, and there's a ton of extra stuff here to keep you engaged. Let's start with the additional credits game. Now, you'll recall in the Saturn version it was Deep Scan from the 70s, but here they went even more old school with a 1966 SEGA electromechanical arcade game called Periscope. Yeah, they used the in-game engine to recreate an old electromechanical amusement, which I think is cool. But you know what's really cool? All of the extra modes in this version. There's a host of extra modes here, all with special features, and they all make changes to the weapons and items, and some even change the environments. Most of them call back to different parts of Sega's history, so let's start with Easy Mode. Easy Mode gives you more health and reduces the amount of health your enemies get, but it also allows your characters to dress as Axe Battler and Tyrus Flare from Golden Axe. And remember our hulked out Rey Mysterio from Stage 3? He becomes Death Adder, and the area the fight takes place in becomes this huge homage to Golden Axe, including the music. There's also Altered Beast Mode, which has you play as a Wolfman and Bird Woman. And here your health is constantly draining, and you have to pick up these spirit orbs to keep it up, which is important because you only get one life before it's automatic game over. In Arrest Mode, the enemies can only be defeated by arresting them. In One-Shot Kill Mode, all the guns kill any character with, you guessed it, one shot. Finally, there's Deadline Mode. In Deadline Mode, you can't be killed, you can only run out of time, but when you do, it's an instant game over. But that's not the real reason this mode is cool. This mode is awesome, because it turns your player into Segata Sanshiro, stalwart defender of the Sega Saturn and hero to children everywhere. Segata Sanshiro is down to punch some terrorists in the face, and murder them with a super-powered tennis ball launcher. That's where this version of the game is willing to go. It takes an already reasonably silly game and makes it even sillier. You can dress up as an advertising mascot of a previous generation and kill terrorists with a super-powered tennis ball launcher. Look, if you're not already sold on this game, I don't know what else to tell you. But hey, let's do like we always do and take a look and a listen side by side. As I said, the sound is basically identical, with the remake using Howard Drawson's original score and all of the voice samples. But graphically, it's not even a contest here, which isn't surprising considering the advancements between the Saturn and the PlayStation 2. And that makes it time to give the edge, and surprising no one, it's the PS2 version. How could it not be? Aside from being one of the best remakes in video game history, it also contains the Saturn version in full, and it's the cheapest option. The US Saturn version, just the disc, is going to cost you $40 to $50. If you want the box and the manual, you're looking at upwards of $100 for a 20-minute long game. The Japanese Saturn version is a lot cheaper, as is almost universally the case with Saturn games. The Japanese version is almost always cheaper. It's about $20 to $30. The PS2 version, if you want an actual disc copy, is going to be a little more than the Saturn version. In Japan, it's about $30 to $40. But the PlayStation Network version is the equivalent of about $8. $8! Totally worth it, and it's not that hard to set up a Japanese PSN account on your US or European PlayStation 3. So I highly recommend you do that, and not just for Dynamite Deka, but for a number of other PS1 and PS2 classics that are available on that service and not on US or European storefronts. And that's it. That is 2016 in same name, different game. But I will be back with more episodes in 2017, but before we get there, Roger has been working very hard on a Christmas special of obscure old games that ties directly into the episode you just watched. So I hope you'll check that out when it drops. Have a happy holidays, and of course a happy new year. We'll see you next time.